The person who looks expensive is not always the person who is secure. Sometimes the richest-looking life is just a beautifully packaged emergency. One life shines harder. The other life can actually say no. That difference is what this video is about. If you want real financial freedom, the goal is not to look successful. It is to quietly build a life with room to breathe, pivot, wait, and walk away. Looking poor does not mean being broke. It means refusing to use your money to perform your income level for strangers. Visible money is the easiest kind to fake. Invisible strength, liquidity, low debt, and options is usually what determines whether a life is sturdy or fragile.
A high income can create the illusion of safety, while cash flow says something very different. Plenty of six-figure earners still feel one surprise away from panic because their lifestyle already claimed the paycheck before it arrived. This is the hidden problem. Earning a lot is not the same as keeping a lot. When money enters and immediately exits, the paycheck looks powerful, but the person holding it stays dependent. An expensive image often comes with invisible upkeep. The purchase is rarely the whole story. The maintenance, replacements, financing, and habit loop are what make it heavy. Real wealth tends to show up as boring superpowers. It buys time, patience, negotiating power, and the ability to make decisions without desperation sitting in the room. Status spending gets rewarded instantly. Safety gets rewarded later, and mostly in private. That timing difference is exactly why so many smart people drift toward the wrong target.
Many people do not spend to enjoy their raise. They spend to keep their social story consistent with the raise. That is how progress starts feeling expensive instead of freeing. The more your identity depends on expensive signals, the more fragile your finances become. You are no longer buying objects, you are renting a version of yourself that must be constantly renewed. So the question is not whether people know saving matters. Most do. The real question is why the pull to spend feels so strong even when the math is obviously not on our side. Humans are social creatures before we are spreadsheet creatures. We learned to read belonging, rank, and safety from signals long before we learned compound interest. That is why status purchases can feel emotionally intelligent in the moment. They offer a fast hit of recognition, and our brains are not naturally built to value slow, invisible progress with the same excitement.
Modern life weaponizes comparison. You can now benchmark your ordinary Tuesday against someone else's curated highlight reel before breakfast, and your financial standards quietly drift upward without permission. Raises often come with an invisible script. Now you are supposed to upgrade. But income growth does not require lifestyle growth at the same speed unless you accept that script without questioning it. The emotional curve is lopsided. The thrill arrives immediately. The cost stays for months or years. That mismatch makes overspending feel small now and very large only after the feeling has already expired. We adapt fast. What felt premium last month becomes normal surprisingly quickly. Meanwhile, the fixed payment does not adapt at all. It keeps showing up like the item still owes you meaning. This is why people can earn more every year and still feel stuck. The extra money was real, but it was assigned a new role before it ever had the chance to become freedom.
The danger is not always one dramatic splurge. Sometimes it is 100 convenient upgrades that each seem harmless, then combine into a monthly burden with almost no emotional payoff. Big purchases rarely arrive alone. They bring an entourage of follow-up costs, chores, and expectations that can quietly change your whole financial posture. Spending is social. If the people around you normalize escalation, restraint can feel awkward, even when it is financially wise. That is why money habits are often group habits wearing individual clothes. And now we reach the part most people underestimate, the opportunity cost. Because the real price of a shiny monthly payment is not the payment, it is the future flexibility that payment prevents you from owning. Every recurring payment competes with your future choices. You are not just spending money once, you are pre-spending slices of tomorrow before tomorrow even arrives.
Take a common example, a heavy car payment versus steady investing. One delivers immediate image and shrinking value. The other can grow quietly for decades and eventually buy something much more powerful than a vehicle: independence. At a decent long-term market return, that kind of monthly amount can grow into something near $900,000 over 30 years. Not guaranteed, of course, but the comparison is still sobering. A stylish payment can quietly consume a life-changing pile of optionality. The same logic works at smaller scales. A financed upgrade is never just about the device. It is about all the quieter uses that money could have served if you had left it unassigned. A better question than "can I afford this?" is how much of my life does this really cost? When money represents labor, attention, and future obligations, purchases start looking very different. Money does not only buy things, it shapes your calendar. Lower fixed costs create blank space, and blank space is where many of the best life decisions become possible.
Every purchase is a negotiation between your present self and your future self. The strange part is that the future version usually wants fewer impressive objects and more room to move. Depreciating assets create a brutal emotional mismatch. You keep paying premium money for something that rapidly becomes familiar, then routine, then just another object you still owe for. And again, the headline payment is only the beginning. Once maintenance and related costs join the picture, the thing you thought you bought starts demanding a supporting cast. Space can be wonderful, but space also asks to be heated, repaired, furnished, cleaned, and justified. More square footage is sometimes less freedom wearing nicer lighting. Image maintenance often compounds on itself. Once you commit to a certain standard publicly, future spending starts arriving as preservation, not indulgence, and that makes it much harder to question. Some spending is not about status, it is about convenience. But convenience can become its own expensive reflex, especially when repeated often enough to harden into background noise. Flexibility has value even when it does not photograph well. A lower-cost life may look less impressive from the outside, but it often gives you more strategic moves when conditions change. Most financial outcomes are not built by one cinematic choice. They are built by repeated defaults. Tiny monthly decisions become either stored power or stored pressure. This math matters because life does not stay smooth. The real payoff of modest living appears when stress enters the story, and one person can respond while another can only react. Optionality first appears in moments that seem small. A person with breathing room can reject bad deals. A person without it may have to accept stress simply because the next bill is already waiting. When uncertainty hits, money does not remove emotion, it changes the temperature of the room. Reserves can turn a chaotic decision into a difficult but manageable one. Freedom also means being available for people you love. A lower burn lifestyle can create the capacity to show up when life asks for your presence instead of your polished image. Sometimes optionality lets you choose the better trajectory instead of the bigger paycheck. If your obligations are light, you can afford to optimize for growth, meaning, or skill instead of immediate appearances. This is one of money's most underrated uses, the ability to leave unhealthy situations. Not recklessly, not dramatically, just without financial fear taking away your self-respect. Cash buffers improve judgment. When you are under pressure, you often choose whatever stops the pain fastest. When you have runway, you can choose what actually makes sense.
Emergencies do not become fun because you saved. They simply become less destructive. That quieter outcome is one of the most valuable forms of wealth most people never get to display. High fixed costs can force bad timing. Lower fixed costs give you the power to wait, and in finance, patience is often impossible for people whose lifestyle made every month urgent. The cheaper your life is to carry, the more mobile your future becomes. Geographic freedom, career freedom, and even social freedom all become easier when your overhead is not oversized. Sometimes optionality is not about escape, it is about recovery. A modest financial structure can make rest, study, retraining, or reflection possible before burnout forces the decision for you. Freedom is not just the power to refuse what is bad, it is also the power to accept what matters, even when it does not arrive wrapped in the highest immediate paycheck.
That is the destination.
Optionality is the ability to make choices from intention instead of pressure, and it usually looks much plainer from the outside than people expect. This does not mean living joylessly or pretending money is bad. It means spending deliberately and refusing to confuse visible upgrades with actual progress. Intentional underconsumption is not anti-enjoyment. In many cases, it produces more enjoyment because your money is concentrated on things that actually improve your life instead of broadcasting a message. Looking poor is not the same as buying low quality. Sometimes the wiser move is a durable, unflashy purchase that quietly outperforms the trendy thing everyone notices for 1 week. One helpful lens is cost per use. A $200 jacket worn 200 times tells a very different story from a $200 jacket worn twice for photos and forgotten.
Ownership is often overrated. In many categories, access solves the problem at a fraction of the cost and complexity. If you only need the benefit, you may not need the burden. A repair mindset changes your relationship with stuff. Instead of chasing replacement as identity, you start treating useful objects as partners that deserve care, which is often better for both money and attention. Many of the best uses of money are surprisingly private. Comfort, health, rest, learning, convenience in moderation, and meaningful experiences often matter more than visible prestige once you are honest. Quiet generosity is another sign of real strength. When your finances are not built as a performance, money can become a tool for usefulness instead of a costume for admiration. What modest living really creates is margin. Margin in your account, margin in your schedule, margin in your emotions, and margin is where better decisions tend to happen.
Peace rarely photographs as well as prestige, but peace compounds into health, clarity, and dignity in ways that are far more useful than momentary admiration. So how do you actually build this without turning your life into a punishment project? The answer is not guilt, it is design. First, define what enough looks like before the market defines it for you. If you never draw your own line, advertising and comparison will keep moving it for profit. Second, separate identity from income. If every raise must become visible, you will always feel pressure to convert earnings into proof instead of into stability. Third, delay major upgrades. Time is one of the best filters for fake desire. Many purchases lose their emotional power once the impulse is forced to survive a little silence.
Fourth, automate the good behavior. What gets moved first has a better chance of becoming wealth. What is left to willpower alone usually gets negotiated away by mood. Fifth, let raises improve your savings rate before they improve your image. You can still enjoy progress, just make sure freedom gets paid before vanity does. Sixth, protect yourself from oversized fixed costs. Variable spending can be adjusted. Fixed obligations are harder to negotiate when life suddenly changes direction. Seventh, spend generously in the few categories that genuinely matter to you and ruthlessly underwhelm in the ones that only serve comparison. Personal finance gets easier when it becomes personal again. Eighth, make bad spending harder. If temptation is frictionless and discipline is exhausting, you design the system backward. Good habits need structural help, not just motivational speeches.
Ninth, prepare your social scripts in advance. Saying no gets easier when you already know how you want to say it. Boundaries feel smoother when they are not invented under pressure. 10th, track freedom in practical units. One useful measure is simply how many months of life your reserves can support. That number makes optionality tangible. 11th, audit your status spending honestly. Not to shame yourself, just to learn where your money is trying to buy identity, approval, or belonging, more than actual usefulness. 12th, run a calendar test before buying. Will this item make my days simpler, richer, or calmer? Or will it add upkeep, bills, and another thing to manage? 13th, design your environment. Your habits are strongly shaped by what is easy, visible, and emotionally loud. Fewer triggers can produce surprisingly better financial behavior without constant self-control.
14th,
Learn the basic mechanics. When you truly understand compounding, inflation, taxes, and risk, restraint stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like intelligent resource allocation. 15th, align with the people your money affects. A freedom-building plan becomes much stronger when the household agrees on what matters more than appearances. 16th, reset regularly. Lifestyle creep does not arrive with a speech, it sneaks in. Periodic review is how you notice drift before drift becomes a permanent expense. But none of these tactics stick for long if your inner definition of success still belongs to somebody else. Systems help. Meaning decides whether the system survives. Financial literacy is what turns this from a trendy mindset into a durable one. When you understand the mechanics, your habits stop depending on temporary motivation.
The more clearly you understand how money behaves over time, the less tempting shallow status games become. Knowledge does not kill desire, but it makes trade-offs much harder to ignore. Wealth is not the size of the inflow alone. It is the protected gap between what comes in and what leaves, defended consistently enough to compound into real security. So yes, sometimes looking poorer is exactly how people become stronger. Not because modesty is magic, but because refusing the performance leaves more fuel for an actually independent life. The most valuable thing money can buy is not applause. It is control over your time, your choices, and your threshold for fear. That kind of wealth is usually very quiet. If your life looks a little less impressive, but feels far more stable, flexible, and self-directed, you are probably not falling behind. You may finally be buying the thing money was supposed to buy in the first place.